It is 3:12 in the morning, JFK Airport, December 11th, 1978. A convoy of vehicles moves through the cargo area with the practiced calm of men who have done this before. They have not, but they look like they have. That distinction is everything. Inside Lufthansa's high-security vault, $5 million in cash and nearly $500,000 in jewels sit behind locks that, by every reasonable measure, should have held. They did not hold. Within 64 minutes, the crew was gone. No shots fired, no alarms triggered, no witnesses who talked. What followed was not a victory lap. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous than the heist itself. And nobody in that crew understood what they had just set in motion. To understand the Lufthansa heist, you have to understand the ecosystem that made it possible. It is 1978. JFK International Airport is, functionally, one of the most porous, high-value cargo facilities in the world. The union infrastructure that runs it is deeply entangled with organized crime, not as an exception, but as a structural feature. Supervisors look away. Workers supplement their incomes. Currency flows in directions that official ledgers never record. Into this environment steps a man named Louis Werner, a cargo agent at Lufthansa, a gambler with debts that have grown past the point of comfort into the territory of genuine danger. Werner knows something that almost nobody outside Lufthansa's operations team knows. On certain international flights, the airline moves bulk currency shipments back to the United States. Cash, negotiable securities, untraceable instruments, all logged, all insured, all sitting in a vault that Werner can describe from memory. He does not have the skills to act on this knowledge, but he knows someone who might. That someone is Henry Hill, an associate of the Lucchese crime family, a man with one foot in legitimate business and both hands in everything else. Hill connects Werner's information to James Burke. Burke, known in certain circles as Jimmy the Gent, is not a flashy man. He does not project power through aggression or theater. He projects it through competence, through his ability to organize complex operations, and, crucially, through his ability to see the full geometry of a situation before anyone else has drawn the first line. What Burke sees when he receives Werner's information is not just a robbery. He sees a window, a specific time-limited aperture in an otherwise impenetrable system. The question is whether he can move fast enough and quiet enough to step through it before it closes. What makes a plan genuinely sophisticated is not its complexity. Complexity is easy. Anyone can make something complicated. What is hard, genuinely hard, is achieving simplicity on the far side of complexity, reducing a problem to its essential levers and pulling only those. Burke's plan for Lufthansa demonstrates this principle with unusual clarity. Start with the information problem. Most robberies fail in the planning phase because the planners are working with incomplete or inaccurate intelligence. They guess at guard rotations. They estimate vault configurations. They assume security protocols that may or may not exist. Burke had none of these problems. He had Werner. And Werner could provide not just static information, not just a floor plan, but dynamic intelligence. He knew when the large shipments arrived. He knew which nights carried elevated risk. He knew the specific procedures that Lufthansa security used because he was part of those procedures. This is the first architectural advantage. The information asymmetry was near total. Burke's team knew things that the defenders of the vault could not know were known. The second advantage was compositional. Burke assembled a crew that was, by any operational standard, unusually disciplined. Not unusually skilled. Discipline and skill are different qualities. These were men who understood the value of silence, of staying in their assigned roles, of not improvising when improvisation was not called for. The crew included men with specific technical competencies, the ability to move a vehicle without attracting attention, the ability to communicate using the precise language of cargo operations, because at 3 a.m. in a freight facility, the most dangerous thing is someone who sounds like they do not belong. Burke solved this with logistics that most observers have underestimated. The vehicles used in the heist were correct, not just any vehicles, the right vehicles for the right area of the airport at the right time. A cargo van that looked like a cargo van, a car that moved with the rhythm of airport operations rather than against it. Consider what this requires. It requires someone who has studied the target environment, not as a crime scene, but as an operational system, who has watched how vehicles move, how personnel interact, what the visual signature of legitimate activity actually looks like versus what outsiders imagine it looks like. This is the difference between planning from a photograph and planning from lived observation. Now consider the timing dimension. Werner had flagged a specific shipment window, a period when Lufthansa was moving an unusually large currency transfer, the kind that occurs only when certain international financial conditions align. Burke did not simply note this window, he built the entire operational schedule around it. The crew would move in the specific hours when airport security was at minimum staffing, not the middle of the night. Middle of the night sounds right intuitively, but early morning is often better because exhaustion has set into overnight shifts and the mental alertness that characterizes a fresh crew is simply absent. Entry was achieved through a mechanism that reveals a great deal about how Burke thought. The crew did not attempt to defeat Lufthansa security through force or technical circumvention. They walked in. They used Lufthansa's own procedures, the requirement to respond to security alarms, to open doors for apparent officials, to cooperate with apparent authority as the attack vector. This is not a new concept. Social engineering predates the term by millennia, but it requires a specific kind of confidence to execute. The confidence that comes not from arrogance, but from thorough preparation. When you know exactly what you are going to say, exactly how a legitimate person in your role would move and speak and respond to questions, the confidence is not performed, it is derived. The interior execution followed a similar logic. The crew worked quickly, methodically, and quietly. They did not harm anyone unless they perceived a specific operational necessity. They moved through the facility with a clarity of purpose that, paradoxically, is one of the strongest social signals of legitimacy. People who are confused look confused. People who know where they are going move like they know where they are going. Within 64 minutes, from entry to departure, the crew had loaded approximately $5 million in cash and nearly $1 million in jewels and negotiable instruments. They departed through the same channels they arrived. The vehicles moved back through the cargo area. No shots fired, no alarms triggered, no one ran. From a purely operational standpoint, this was nearly perfect execution. The plan's architecture was sound, the intelligence was accurate, the crew performed. But there is one variable that Burke had accounted for in the planning phase, and then, in the aftermath, catastrophically neglected. That variable was not law enforcement. It was not Lufthansa's investigators. It was not even Werner, who would eventually cooperate with authorities. The variable was the crew itself. And here is where the plan, which had survived contact with every external adversary, began to collision with something far more dangerous: the psychology of men who had just gotten away with something enormous and were now trying to decide what that meant for their own security. There is a concept in game theory called the prisoner's dilemma. Most people encounter it as an abstract puzzle. What the Lufthansa aftermath illustrates is what the prisoner's dilemma looks like when the stakes are not hypothetical, when the players have real histories with each other, and when the perceived solution to mutual defection risk is not negotiation, it is violence. In the days following the heist, something shifted. The crew had been paid, partially. Burke had distributed funds, but not equally, and not according to what every participant believed they had been promised. This is not unusual in criminal enterprises. Disputes over division are endemic. But what followed at Lufthansa was not a dispute, it was a cascade. Parnell Edwards, Stax Edwards, Richard Eaton, Joe Manry, Robert McMahon, Paolo Licastri. Over a period of several months following December 1978, these men, all connected in various ways to the Lufthansa operation, were killed. Read that list again. Parnell Edwards, found shot in his car. Stax Edwards, supposed to dispose of the van used in the heist. He fell asleep instead. He was shot shortly after. The van was found by police. This is the moment. This is the exact moment where the geometry changes. When law enforcement found the van, they had a thread, not the whole cloth, but a thread. And in investigations of this kind, one thread is enough if you know how to pull it. But here is what is critical to understand. The van was not the primary reason the investigation eventually succeeded. The van created a connection. What sustained the investigation, what gave it traction, was the body count. Because bodies attract attention in a way that a van does not. Each death was, from one perspective, a rational security calculation. A person who knows too much and cannot be fully trusted is, in the logic of organized crime, a liability that compounds over time. The calculation is brutal, but internally coherent. Eliminate the liability before it eliminates you. The problem is that this logic, applied sequentially by multiple actors with overlapping information sets, produces a visible pattern. And visible patterns are precisely what law enforcement needs. Henry Hill is watching all of this. Hill is many things, but he is not inattentive. He understands what is happening. He understands that the elimination of crew members is not simply a security measure, it is also a message. And he begins to calculate his own position in an environment where the rules have shifted. Hill is arrested in 1980, not for Lufthansa, but on narcotics charges. He faces significant prison time, and he makes a decision that, from his perspective, is the same kind of rational calculation that Burke had been making with the crew members. He cooperates. He becomes a government witness. Hill's testimony does not fully solve Lufthansa. The actual participants in the physical heist are never all conclusively identified and convicted. Burke himself is convicted of murder, the killing of Richard Eaton, but not of the heist itself. He dies in prison in 1996. The plan, which had functioned with near mechanical precision in its execution phase, collapsed entirely in its aftermath phase. And the mechanism of collapse was not external, it was internal. Consider what Burke actually faced in the weeks after the heist. He had approximately $6 million in assets that could not be spent, displayed, or discussed. He had a crew of people who knew things. He had a tip provider, Werner, who was both a liability and a potential cooperator. And he had a Lucchese family structure above him that expected a return on the organizational infrastructure they had provided. And he had no reliable mechanism for managing any of these relationships simultaneously. The plan was architecturally sophisticated at the operational level and architecturally naive at the social level. It assumed that the trust relationships, which had held during the high-pressure period of planning and execution, would continue to hold during the lower pressure but longer duration period of sitting on the money and staying quiet. That assumption was wrong, not because the people were uniquely untrustworthy, but because the incentive structure changed the moment the heist was complete. Before, everyone needed each other to succeed. After, the cooperative surplus had been extracted. What remained was a zero-sum calculation about who was a risk to whom. That shift from cooperative necessity to competitive threat assessment is the precise moment where the plan's flaw became visible. It was not visible during planning because it doesn't feel like a flaw during planning. In planning, everyone is aligned.
Here is the insight. Not a moral, not a lesson, a structural observation about how human decision-making operates under certain conditions. The Lufthansa heist failed not because of poor planning, but because of a category error in how its planners conceptualized the problem. They treated the operation as a problem that ended at a specific moment in time, the departure from JFK. Everything before that moment was planned with precision. Everything after was assumed. This is not a rare mistake. It is arguably the most common mistake in high-stakes collaborative decision-making. We plan for the goal. We do not plan for the morning after the goal. There is a mechanism behind this. Planning requires a mental model of the future, and mental models have a natural resolution limit. The further you project, the blurrier the image. The heist itself, the operational sequence, was close range. Burke could visualize it with high fidelity. The aftermath was distant, and distant things feel, in the moment of planning, like they will resolve themselves. They do not resolve themselves. They resolve according to the incentive structures that exist at the time they occur. This is the precise insight. The incentive structure that holds a collaborative group together during a high-pressure shared challenge is not the incentive structure that governs behavior after the challenge ends. And the transition between these two states is almost never planned for, because planning for it requires acknowledging that the group may not remain a group. Burke knew, intellectually, that loose ends were dangerous. His response, eliminating loose ends physically, was internally consistent with that knowledge, but it applied a tactical solution to what was fundamentally a systemic problem. You cannot kill your way out of a coordination failure when the coordination failure involves enough people to create a visible pattern. The operational language for this is sometimes called the winner's curse of secrets. The more successful the operation, the more people know about it, and the more each of those people represents a potential defection point. Success, paradoxically, maximizes the exposure surface. What would have addressed this, genuinely addressed it, not merely postponed it? A pre-agreed, legally unenforceable but socially binding protocol for the aftermath period. Specific instructions for behavior, spending, communication, and silence, not assumed but explicitly negotiated before the operation, when incentives were still aligned and everyone had reason to take the protocol seriously. This is not a criminal observation, it is an organizational one. The organizations that survive high-stakes collaborative operations in any field are the ones that plan for the day after success as carefully as they plan for the operation itself. Burke did not do this, and the evidence suggests he did not even recognize it as a planning problem. The operation was the plan. What came after was assumed to be manageable. The gap between manageable and managed is where most high-stakes plans actually fail, not in the execution, in the assumption that execution is where the story ends. James Burke never stood trial for the Lufthansa heist. The man who planned one of the largest cash robberies in American history was convicted of a different crime entirely. The operation that worked perfectly left no prosecutable evidence of itself. The aftermath that was never planned left bodies, a cooperating witness, and a conviction record that has no entry for Lufthansa. So, here is the question, and it is a genuine one, not a rhetorical frame. If a plan is executed without meaningful error, and the planners are never held accountable for that plan specifically, does the plan count as a failure? The cash was never recovered. The primary architect died in prison, but for something else. The heist itself remains, by most legal and evidentiary standards, unsolved. The plan collapsed, the people collapsed, but the operation, the thing Burke actually designed, worked. What does that tell us about how we measure failure? And more precisely, whose definition of failure are we using when we call this story a cautionary tale? Leave your answer below. The question has more than one defensible position.